Greetings. In America and Canada, we're into the what we call football, the football season. And for you young people out there, why wasn't Cinderella a good football player? She had a pumpkin for a coach.
Oh, no.
Now, you probably thought I was going to say because she ran away from the ball. Well, anyway, today I want to give you wise warnings. I want to talk about wise warnings. The Bible, of course, is helping us to live the way of life God would have us to live, for our own good, for the good of everybody else, for the successful fulfillment of the potential that we have, that God gave us. And in the book of Ephesians, in the 5th chapter, in verse 15, it says, see then that you walk circumspectly. We have to be careful. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. When I was a young man, college age, I spent some very pleasant moments at the headquarters of the Chabad movement in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And the Chabad movement in Judaism Chabad stands for Chokhmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Da'at, knowledge. So first you gather data, you have knowledge, and then you see how one fact relates to the other, and you have understanding, and then you learn how to apply your understanding, and that is wisdom. This I learned later on from Christian instruction, or maybe at the same time for that matter, because I did a lot of reading before becoming a part of the church. Obviously, that I was exposed to certain ideas, and finally they began to click. But anyway, I learned that you can acquire knowledge and you can have understanding, and finally how to really apply that understanding. That's wisdom. And wisdom, of course, is very important. And what I'm talking about is the kind of wisdom that is spiritually grounded. There's a famous pundit, talk show host, lecturer, author that many of you know, Dennis Prager, and he said he was at a leading university in the 1960s. I used to hang out there a lot. I didn't go there, but I hung out there a lot. Or at least enough to be familiar with it. And in that particular university, there were a lot of people who were highly educated, but were not wise. And he thought about it, but he had grown up in the yeshiva world, and so he knew the Hebrew. Reshit chokhmah yirat Adonai seichel tov l'chol osehem tehilato amedet la'ad. I'm going to Psalm 111, verse 10. The fear of the eternal is the beginning of wisdom. So, you're not going to be truly wise if you don't have that reverence for the Almighty. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all those who do them. What is them? Well, obviously the commandments, God's word. So that's why the translator says that. A good understanding of all those who do His commandments. His praise endures forever. So this is the basis of wisdom. Is a reverence for God, a fear, realizing that God is ultimately in control and He has a plan and He knows what's best for us. He wants us to fulfill the potential that we have within us, and He's given us inspired instruction that we should follow. But when we ignore it or oppose it, then we're being foolish. And there are different words for fool that you find in the Bible, and I want to talk about 4 of them today. And they're, in a way interchangeable, but I think they focus on certain aspects of being foolish. And we don't want to be any of those 4, of course. We want to be wise. One term that we find is the term naval. And it seems that an aval is a person who just all through life just consistently is foolish, just lives that way, and doesn't change. And Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, talks about somebody who's just spends his life acquiring wealth, and you could easily lose it. You know what happened in 1929. A lot of people all of a sudden went from being well off to not being so well off. And I'm sorry, did I go 29? I meant to say 17. In Jeremiah 17 in verse 11, as a partridge that broods but does not hatch, so is he who gets riches but not by right. So he's dishonest, he's immoral, he's unethical, and he acquires a lot. But you can acquire a lot and then you can lose it all, and that happens. It will. I'll instead of interrupting myself, I'll read the verse. As a partridge that broods but does not hatch, so is he who gets riches but not by right. It will leave him in the midst of his days, and at his end he will be a fool. He'll be an aval, somebody who lived his life foolishly. And in the 14th Psalm, one very foolish attitude is to try to believe that there isn't a supreme being. That's very foolish. In Psalm 14, it says the fool has said in his heart there is no God. That is of course a very big, very very serious mistake. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good. Unfortunately, that often seems to be the way it is in the world. And here in poetic language, we have a bit of despondency here. But here, as we speak about God, we are using for most of this psalm the tetragrammaton, YHWH, that name of God, based upon the verb to be. And we find the same. This is in the first book of Psalms. Now in the second book of Psalms, we find the same thought, but there, the most of the scriptures refer to God as Elohim, and a more generic term in a way. It starts the same way. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt and have done abominable iniquity. There is none who does good. But then, if you keep on reading, you see that you have Elohim here rather than YHWH. That's in Psalm 53 in the second book of Psalms. It reminds me of that same school where Dennis Prager went to school, where I used to hang out on occasion. The subway station there, various things were scrawled on the walls. You may remember the song from Simon and Garfunkel. The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls. Sounds of silence. Anyway, there was a lot of things scrawled on the walls at that subway station there at that university. And one of them, a person said, "God is dead." Nietzsche, evidently he made that statement. That philosopher, German philosopher, God is dead. Nietzsche, and then under it he wrote, "Nietzsche is dead. God." He signed it God. God is dead. Nietzsche, and then Nietzsche is dead. And he signed it God. When I told that story to one of my colleagues in the yeshiva world, who's now a great rabbi in New Jersey, he told me, in other words, he who laughs last laughs best. But anyway, we have that. There was a man in the book of Samuel who had that attitude. Who, I don't know if he was an atheist, but he just was he was a nasty person, a very bad-tempered person. He was well-to-do and he didn't have compassion. And David would have really come down hard on him, but the man's wife pleaded and worked things out. The story of Abigail. I have now a granddaughter in Abigail, and you've heard of Abigail Adams maybe, but I hope you've also know about the Abigail who wound up marrying David. She was married to this fellow, but he died. But what it's interesting, his name was Naval, and my name is Mark, and my secular name. My Hebrew name is Meir, meaning illuminator. But my parents needed a name that began with M to go with Meir, so they chose the name Mark, the secular name Mark, and It doesn't have anything to do with a bookmark or a mark, maybe like a grade or a mark you make on a paper. It has nothing to do with that. It actually is related to Latin, and it has to do with the god Mars. So I guess you could say Mark means a warrior. So the reason I say that is because there was a man in the Bible named Naval, and I don't know how he got that name. It probably had to do with maybe another language or another meaning of the word in those days, but it also fit him. It's like, for example, my name is Mark. If I went out for some athletic event, the coach might say, "Uh-oh, I'm getting a bad mark." On the other hand, I did really good in my Talmud class as a young man. So if I were going into a Talmudic academy, maybe the teacher would say, "Oh, we're getting a good mark." In any case, that really is not my name, but that's how it comes out. So like a funny coincidence. You follow what I'm saying? So that's what we see in 2 Samuel 25:25. I think it's in the 25th verse of 2 Samuel 20. I'm sorry, am I in 1 Samuel 25? Okay, and she talks about her husband. Oh no, it's a little earlier. No, it is verse 25. So it's easy to remember. 1 Samuel 25:25. Are you with me if you're following along? Please let not Abigail speaking to David. Please let not my lord regard the scoundrel Nabal, which Americans would say, Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. And so Nivala, the word for foolishness, so now it becomes a noun, Nivala. And folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. I wasn't there to reject them as my husband did. And anyway, so I thought that might be of interest to you. You could study that passage. Now another type of a fool in the you find in Proverbs, of course, as I said, in the Bible you have the word naval, and another word that you find in the Bible for a fool is kasil. And when you transliterate Hebrew, the vowels are as in Spanish or the Romance languages, a, e, I, o, u. So you could transliterate it K-S-I-L, kasil. And that seems to be somebody who just is, what's the right, kind of, frankly stupid, because they have no vision. They just wallow around in the material world, and they don't have a sense that there's something beyond. They just sort of wallow around in the material, and they never rise above that. And there is a passage in there's a section in Proverbs 26 which speaks a lot about the fool, the kasil, and I want to go to Proverbs 26, and there's quite a few things said about the fool here. And in other words, here's what we're not supposed to be. As snow in summer and rain in harvest, right? That doesn't make sense, right? So honor is not fitting for a fool. So if your honor is not fitting for somebody who is a foolish person, and a whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey. I'm in verse 3, and a rod for the fool's back. Here the author is just showing his frustration with people who just won't, as I said, they won't rise above the material world. They won't think in terms of what's above and beyond the material. And there's quite a bit about the fool and the kasil in this chapter. But now I want to tell you something very scary. As I said, we're giving wise warnings in this talk. In verse 20, I'm in Proverbs 26. No, it's a little bit later than that. Verse 12, a little bit earlier. I'm in Proverbs 26:12. It says, "Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him." So let's not get complacent. You know, the Bible warns the church in Revelation about thinking of itself as rich and increased with goods and having need of nothing. Let's remain humble and teachable. And let's realize that we don't have all the answers, and we always need to be growing in understanding. As it says, do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than for him. Now, as we talk about the fool, the Kasil, we go to Proverbs 26, verse 4 and verse 5. And I think it was at University of Texas at Austin that I saw that scrawled on a wall somewhere. And I think that might have been done by some skeptic to show, you see how the Bible contradicts itself, which of course is, that person who wrote that, if that was their intention, they were being foolish. Because, the book of Ecclesiastes tells you, there's a time for this and a time for that. There's a time to build up, there's a time to break, to tear down, and so on. In Proverbs 26, it says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. So there are some occasions when a person really asks a kind of question that doesn't deserve an answer. You don't get down in the mud, as it were, with the person. They should know better. What a stupid, let's not dignify that by even answering it. On the other hand, it goes on to say in the 5th verse, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes, which is very dangerous. I just read to you. So, in other words, if he has a question and he thinks, aha, this is a trick question, nobody can answer it. There are people like that. And, if they think that they can sort of undermine a lot of great teachings by some quirky question that they have. So in that case, you need to go ahead and deal with it, so the person realizes, no, sorry, you can't undermine what you're trying to undermine. So we have an example of that in the ministry of Jesus Christ, where he applies these proverbs, or these verses in Proverbs 26:4 and 26:5. He comes to Jerusalem. He's going to be arrested. He's going to be imprisoned and tortured and crucified. Then he's going to be resurrected. And in Matthew 21, the Pharisees attempt to sort of put him in a bad situation by demanding by what authority he's doing what he's doing. And it should be around verse 23. Okay, verse 23 of Matthew 21, if you're following along. Now when he came into the temple, the chief priests and the elders, the people confronted him as he was teaching and said, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? Now, he answered them with a question, which is, of course, a very Jewish thing to do. How do you feel? How should I feel? Why do you always answer a question with a question? Do I do that? Of course, I'm kidding. But anyway, verse 24. But Jesus answered and said to them, I will also ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, where is it from? From heaven or from men? So he didn't answer their question, but he said, I will answer it if you answer this question. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So Yochanan, the Hamadbil, right? John the Baptizer, he was popular among the people. He was, of course, odd in certain ways. Not your typical personality, but very respected. Very powerful preacher. Very righteous individual, of course. But if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we do not know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. So he didn't answer their question. But later on, in the 23rd verse of the next chapter, he does answer a question, because this is about a basic doctrine in biblical Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, And of course, in Christianity, the doctrine of the resurrection. Look at Hebrews 6. It's a basic doctrine. And so in verse 23 of Matthew 22, and maybe some of you saw the movie Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I suppose it came from this encounter here. The same day the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. That's deliberate marriage. I think you find that you find Deuteronomy 25. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first died after he had married, and having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. Likewise, the second also, the third, even to the 7th. Let me just go back and make sure that I just gave you the right reference. But you will find it in the Pentateuch. But right, it is in Deuteronomy 25. If you want to check it out and go into it at another time. So where am I now? I'm on verse. I'll go to verse 26. Likewise, the second also, and the third, even to the 7th. So they're coming up with this, sort of trick question. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Well, let's understand that there is coming a great right throne judgment period when people will be resurrected to physical life. But ultimately, what is the goal? What is the goal of the resurrection ultimately? God wants to resurrect us to immortal life, to spirit life. And that is really the goal. That is really the resurrection that, that ultimately is what counts, is whether or not we're going to be dead forever or alive forever. So I'm not sure that what we have here is everything he said. But what is said here is how he's looking forward ultimately to the resurrection that we read about in Revelation 21, 22, the New Jerusalem. Jesus answered and said to them, You are mistaken, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God. And that's really the problem with those who deny the resurrection. It's a lack of faith in the power of God, frankly. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. So at that point, we're spirit beings, and life is radically different, but radically better. But we're spirit then, so we don't we don't have marriage as we do as physical human beings. So he dealt with the question. In effect, what he's saying is, forget your trick questions. God can work all those things out. The ultimate goal is immortal life, and God can work these other details out. But then he goes on to say, you who only accept the 5 books of Moses, who don't accept the prophets for doctrine, even in the 5 books of Moses, the resurrection is implied. And he talks to them about how God revealed himself to Moses as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, implying, that they still have a future. Even though they're now dead, they have a future. Of course, that's the resurrection. And they're going to be resurrected to immortal life. Anyway, you can read other scriptures about that. I want to go to verse 31. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. So he did answer the fool, who thought that trick question would, could kind of undo everything. No. So he did it. So he followed the Proverbs here. So we've talked about the Naval and the Kasil. There's another kind of fool, and that's one who just never is properly informed. never is properly informed. He's the Pethi. Pei Tav Yud. We pronounce it Peti. But God's word is there to help such a person if he's willing to look into it. He's a simpleton, but he doesn't have to stay that way. That's why we have the Bible. So let's go to Psalm 19, and in Psalm 19 is expanded in 119. So let's first go to 19. And in Psalm 19, it says, "The law of the Lord is perfect." This is verse 7. "Converting the soul, the testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple." All right, Machkimat Peti. So it can help a person who's not well informed to be well informed. And as I said, that psalm is expanded in Psalm 119. So if we go there, Psalm 119, and I want verse 30. Psalm 119. I'm sorry, 130. Psalm 119, verse 130. Okay, here we are in Psalm 119. A lot of verses in that psalm. So let's go to 130. And it tells us, "The entrance at your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple." So once again, if you're a simpleton, you don't have to stay that way. And that's why particularly we have the book of Proverbs. I'm focusing today, many of the verses I'm quoting are from Proverbs. And it says that why do we have the book of Proverbs? In Proverbs 1, verse 4, "To give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion." So we want people who are simpletons not to stay that way. And in Proverbs 14 and verse 15, it says, the simple believes every word, but the prudent considers with his steps." So if you're poorly informed, you're going to be gullible. You're going to believe all kinds of all kinds of things that are wrong. You need to be well grounded in Scripture so that you're not going to be unstable. You're not going to be deceived. And you want to be able to consider events and what's going on and how they affect you. In Proverbs 22 and verse 3, it says, "A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." So if you remain ignorant, that's not right. You need to be well informed. You need to know what's in the Bible so that you can see a situation ahead of you that's dangerous and you can deal with it. Proverbs 27 and verse 12, "A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. The simple pass on and are punished." So you see it's repeated even. So let's not be people who are poorly informed. Let's know what's in the Bible so that we can navigate our way through life. Life is challenging, as I read to you back in Ephesians 5:15. Did I read that verse? The days are evil, it says. In other words, obviously there's a lot of other scriptures that you read. You don't take that one phrase and enshrine it, as it were, and not get other input. But the point of that scripture, the days are evil, in the sense that we are always vulnerable to not do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. That's a constant pressure that we live in this day and age, in this premillennial world. It's a premillennial world, so that means there's always the danger of sins of omission or commission, and so we have to be careful. And so we need to know what God has to say, so that we can, as I said, navigate our way through life. And I want to now talk about, unfortunately, yet another kind of fool, and that is the Evil, one who is perverse, just ridiculous in his behavior, because he just refuses to be instructed. A perverse person who's being silly. And in Proverbs 1 and verse 7, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, as we know from the Psalms. But fools despise wisdom and instruction, evilim. And that term as a noun, foolishness, you find a lot in Proverbs 26. When it talks about the kasil, it also talks about evilut, foolishness. And so there are some people who just are perverse. They just won't listen. They won't be taught. And we are to remain teachable throughout our lives. I'm frankly always excited as I continue to learn, and sometimes I'm very embarrassed that there's things I know now that I should have known long ago. And so I'm grateful to still be living and learning. And let me see. I think I want Proverbs 27 and verse 22. Yeah, Proverbs 27 and verse 22. Though you grind a fool in a mortar with a pestle along with crushed grain, yet his foolishness will not depart from him. So, some people, they just don't want to. They just refuse to grow and to learn and to change. That's of course not. Jesus Christ wants us constantly to be renewed. Paul talks about it. Jesus Christ talks about it in the Gospels. That we're constantly growing and getting better. We should be getting better all the time, right? Especially if we have God's Spirit to guide and direct us and reinforce what is good and avoid, push away what is evil. And then in the 29th chapter of Proverbs, I'm going to go to the ninth verse there. There are different ways you can understand this, but the basic point, I think, would be the same. If a wise man contends with a foolish man, whether the fool rages or laughs, there is no peace. Well, that's the interpretation here. Whoever's doing the raging and the laughing, the point is that if you have a discussion with somebody like that, if you try to help that person. One thing I was taught as a young man in the church was a saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So, sometimes you can try to help a person, but they just won't be helped, and that's very, very sad. So, we do have, as I said, various kinds of fools, and they're all of them are need help, and all of us can be that way at times, and need to overcome those tendencies. We want to learn and to grow. We also want to be aware of a greater reality than what we know is around us. There is a spirit realm. There is a supreme being. There is a plan of salvation. There is an accountability. Every one of us is going to be accountable for every word, thought, and deed. That's the reality. And so we do need to be wise and not foolish. And in the book of James, we are told, that we know Solomon prayed for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom. But unfortunately, Solomon, I think, got so, confident in his wisdom that he began to think of himself as an exception to the rules. That somehow he could do things that obviously shouldn't be done by a king or by anybody, and get away with it. And so he sort of blew it at the end of his life. So even though he was responsible for Proverbs, nevertheless, towards the end of his life, he was being very unwise, to say the least. And so ultimately, the kingdom split after his death. But he did leave us with Kohelet, with Ecclesiastes, which is a book of wisdom, which shows that by the end of his life, he did get the point finally, And that book is one that ought to be studied, particularly during the Festival of Tabernacles. That's when it really is effective, because during that festival, more than any other, we are really living well if we are following God's commandments, if we've saved up for the festival. Because during the days of unleavened bread, we're limited. We're not leavened, and so we're limited in our diet. But during the Festival of Tabernacles, we don't have that limitation. So that's, in a way, the most, what's the right word, indulgent of the festival seasons, when you don't have to worry about if something's leavened or not. But after a while, you begin to realize that there's more to or you ought to realize that there's more to the festival than going to some new place and you may be enjoying better cuisine that you normally enjoy or whatever. You realize, what are we there for? To learn to fear God. That's why we're there. God in effect wines you and dines you, so you'll be in a good frame of mind to be instructed. So anyway, in James 1 and verse 5, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. So let's realize that all of us need more wisdom, and God has said, if we come to him and ask for wisdom, that he will grant it. He will help us to be wiser, and so we can then dig into his word and gain more and more benefit from it, and gain a lot of benefit from what I've been reading to you today. Wise warnings. All the best to you and yours.